Oh, hello, four people watching. That's unusual. I'm used to only two these days. But, oh, five. How nice, how nice. I was talking, well, I was streaming earlier today and I felt it went a little awry, and although topics were alighted on, they were never tackled properly because of the disruptive behaviour of you-know-who. I have to be patient with her, and I thought I was up to a point, and then I couldn't stand it anymore. But what I thought was Spacepan gave me a few ideas, and he's probably asleep now, bearing in mind the fact of Hong Kong time. But I think he's given me a few pointers, and he actually pointed me to the book of Stefan Molyneux that you could buy from Amazon, but which is in fact free on his own website, which I have quickly speed read, and it is about his universally preferable behaviour, the very topic that he was trying to, the very idea that he was trying to impress upon JF. Having thought about the matter, it occurs to me, well, these philosophical terms occur to me, and because Stefan Molyneux is a proponent of this idea of universally preferable behaviour, this puts him in the category of a absolutist. And an absolutist is someone who holds absolute principles in political, philosophical or theological matters. So I would say I am an absolutist too, though you don't have to worry too much that I'll be too much of a pain, because I'm quite a flexible, liberal sort of absolutist. In that, I suppose it also means a fundamentalist. So what is Stefan Molyneux absolutist about? Well, he's absolutely insistent on his idea, and of course he would be, in order to promote it with as much energy as he does. So he's saying, I absolutely believe that there are such things as a universally preferable behaviour, and he's taken the trouble to write a book about it, explaining that in the absence of God and his rejection of scripture, his little book of about 134 pages long, which I speed read this afternoon, will have to do. And I read it eagerly, thinking I would find at least a list of rules that he would say are universally preferable or universally absolute and to be universally applied. But it didn't really come across that clearly in his book at all. And while I was reading, while I was thinking, I, of course, thought of the Noahide laws, which are actually very easy to remember and understand. So, to recap, the Noahide laws say we must not practice idolatry, we must not blaspheme, we must not murder, we must not steal, we must not eat parts of an animal while it's still alive. We must establish courts of law, and we must forbid sexual immorality. So that's 7. Okay, I should have said it another way, which is to say all the, you can't do X, Y, and Z, and then the final one is you must establish courts of justice. And that seems to me pretty universal and apple pie. Yeah, it's motherhood and apple pie as far as I'm concerned, but I can imagine that there will be people like Vince and Bruno who will be saying, I don't agree with not practicing idolatry because he's an idolater, because he's a Hindu, and he's also gay, so he would want to be practicing sodomy. And of course, idolatry is a kind of blasphemy. But it can. Blasphemy is, I suppose, a wider thing. But anyway, let's just say that these are probably the three things that will be most controversial, because I think everybody can see, well, obviously, if we were going to have the rule of law, we have to enforce it in courts and establish a person's guilt after due process. And people would mostly agree that they shouldn't eat limbs of an animal while it's still alive, and they can probably agree that murder should be against the law, and so should theft, and so should sexual offences, although they might not agree with each other about what is or isn't a sexual offence. They might, disagree with each other about the age of consent, and whether fornication should be punished, and whether sodomy should be punished, and underage sex. Some people have been trying to lower the age of consent. So, within those parameters, there's still a lot of room for controversy. But the point is, with the Noahide laws, it neatly makes very clear what is to be forbidden and what is a positive duty of a government. So the Noahide laws are really for Gentile nations, and presumably the purpose of the Noahide laws is for Jews to decide who is or isn't a righteous Gentile, and also which nations are or are not righteous Gentile nations. I know Stefan Molyneux will be having a problem with the provisions of idolatry, blasphemy, and sexual immorality, because I think a lot of people do disagree with each other on what should and shouldn't be allowed in the bedroom. Most people now, I believe, are in the majority people who say that as long as the parties concerned are adults of full legal capacity and consenting, that's all right. But I would be taking a stricter view on that. But let's just say that we can, agree to forbid sexual immorality, whatever we think it means, because even the worst kind of sex offender might think, well, certain sexual acts should not be allowed. So we can see the purpose of the Noahide laws. I think they're far superior to Molyneux's universally preferable behaviours, and of course they're sort of neatly, clearly listed in a list of 7, so we know what it is and we can memorise what it is, and this is so much clearer than his book on universally preferable behaviour, particularly when he didn't go to the trouble of listing them. And you think, well, why didn't he just adopt the Noahide laws? And okay, you'll say, oh, but I don't agree with all of them. But you can see the power and simplicity of the Noahide laws. And therefore, why not adopt the most powerful and simplest system that people will find so much easier to understand, Stefan? after all, a child could remember, could reel off it, and count on its fingers, all the 7 Noahide laws, and all the more could adults do that, and they can say, no, of course there should be a law against tearing bits of an animal and eating those bits while it's still alive. We're not barbarians, and obviously we want courts of law to enforce justice, administer justice, and of course we shouldn't be murdering each other and stealing from each other and committing sexual immorality. And talking about sexual immorality, Stefan uses rape a lot as a example of I don't think it's quite necessary. I think we can all agree that rape is sexual intercourse without consent. And of course, the controversial bit is whether force is required, but let us say that it is without consent. And he went on to consider, and I think he confused a lot of people by talking about whether rape can possibly be good, and what if the person enjoyed it, or and the point is, yes, of course you might enjoy murdering and stealing and committing sexual offences on other people if you are a really terrible person, but of course the word reciprocity was not used at all, as well as the word Noahide, because I think those words encompass many ideas that would have simplified the explication of Stefan's ideas. I've actually forgotten what I was going to say. What was I saying? Shall I check with the chat to see if they're actually listening to anything I say? Oh, cookies, come on. I know that there are lots of... I happen to notice that there are lots of people already streaming, so I don't mind. I mean, thank you for coming here rather than going to Brutus, going to Luke, and a few of the others. I do know that they're streaming. I don't mind. I do it really to... make things clearer in my head. I find that while I'm explaining things to people, something actually becomes clearer, and there may even be moments of revelation. So what was I saying? I bet you've all forgotten. So I told you about the Noahide laws, and then I said something about Stefan. Oh yes, rape. And he confused everyone by talking about whether it could be a good or bad thing. And obviously, sexual offences, nobody wants sexual offences to be committed against us. And obviously, it would only be a sexual offence if we were underage or objecting. And but the interesting thing about rape is that it can be called for indirectly, and there may be circumstances where it is expected, and of course that would be in a war situation, because if your country has been invaded by a foreign army, then I think you would expect your women to be raped. And to call for the invasion of another country would be obviously calling for the women of another country to be raped. So these things are indirectly acknowledged. But of course it is not the ostensible purpose of when a young man joins the army, he's not, or is he thinking of, well, I might have opportunities to kill and rape. Who knows? But the point is, it is generally acknowledged that every nation would need an army, and if the men who join it have a taste for violence and want to acquire booty, and women can, do often fall under the category of booty. We certainly know that in ancient forms of warfare, and of course this practice is also acknowledged in the Quran. And also we do know that rape is a weapon of war. We can look up Wikipedia. War is, of course, includes amongst its many lists of inconveniences and damage and suffering and atrocities. Rape would be one of them, and this is something wise leaders would wish to avoid. And of course, they would want to avoid being invaded, having a civil war in their own country, and of course, revolution would might lead to civil war, as we know from the Russian Revolution. So we do need to think very carefully about these things. We don't want our government to be insane warmongers where they think every war is a party and they're the world's number one party girl. But if you are a world empire, like the British, like the Americans, you kind of become a bit of a party girl, forgetting that party girls can sometimes make terrible mistakes and destroy their own reputations by ending up being pumped and dumped and knocked up and contracting some social disease. So we really should be careful. Also, war is really a gamble. We know what happened to the British, who thought that declaring war on Germany in 1914 would be a very quick war. There was even a song to the effect that our boys will be back by Christmas, and it was a summer war. So the thing about war and revolution is they are gambles, and I don't think a lot of leaders get that. And that was why the ancient Greeks, the Athenians, worshipped a goddess called the goddess of war and wisdom, and her name was Athena. Unfortunately, they must have worshipped her incorrectly to end up destroyed, because they didn't win the war against Sparta, who was and Sparta was another Greek state that had a different way of governing themselves, a different way of social organisation, and this may in itself be reason enough for war. Communism, capitalism, patriarchy, matriarchy, it could prove to be a source of conflict, political and perhaps revolutionary or military conflict. Who knows? Let us hope that nothing too bad happens, and nothing too bad will happen if people stay reasonable and honest and rational and moral in the way that they tackle disagreements. And this is what I keep wanting to go back to, because if you do listen to my previous stream, you will notice that towards the end I did lose patience with Jen and kicked her off, or rather I ended the stream because I couldn't stand it anymore. Why does she behave in this way? Well, she is, after all, well known to be not in the best of mental health, and we must make allowances. I do care about her. I hope she will get better, but I seem to aggravate her just by talking to her and by interacting with her. I provoke possibly the worst behaviour, though I do see quite bad behaviour. Perhaps I provoke her into her worst behaviour. And again, this kind of mutual antagonism is a reluctance to accept each other's rules. So she thinks I should defer to her because she's some queen, like she was some queen, and I'm insisting that I won't. I would prefer it. I would prefer it if Jen behaved like a civilized human being and was just honest and logical and civil, and would declare a few principles, wouldn't swear, wouldn't be constantly insulting and needling me. I think in that last stream I was being quite reasonable and ignored all her insults and swearing until she just couldn't stop herself from interrupting when Spacepan and I were having a discussion about I think the Noahide laws. She was so triggered by the very idea of Noahide laws that I couldn't even get a word in edgeways because she was talking and shouting over me. This is, of course, disgraceful in a mature woman, but again, we should make allowances for poor Jen. And some of you may ask why I even bother. And the answer remains that Jen is important because she is female of a certain race, a certain class, a certain education, and though she is unreasonable, she is also the archetype of Western woman. And I'm afraid it's not just Western woman who is neurotic and mentally ill and intellectually dishonest, as well as sexually and morally corrupt. You all are. And it is necessary for you to admit it, or you won't see the point of secular coronism. And of course you'll all throw up your hands and want to run away and say that I can't make you. And it is of course true that I can't make you. I have no army, but the whole idea is that you're supposed to be honest, rational, moral human beings capable of being moved by truth, logic and morality, and the awful truth is that you aren't, because you are morally degenerate, and so are your politicians. And this is what I'm faced with. That you will never shift yourselves, and you will say in your apathetic way that it's too late, or nobody listens to us. I don't dare because I'll lose my job. And I think we should make the most of this quarantining period of the quarantine to think a little bit more about what is the right or wrong thing to do. If we are indeed near death, then shouldn't we, for once in our lives, do the correct and courageous thing? Why don't you all just have a little think? I know you're social retards and rejects and you don't have any friends, and even if you wanted to help me, nobody would listen to you anyway, and this is the trouble. You are pathetic rejects, unmarriageable, and that's why no one cares apart from me. And this is your predicament. But back to Stefan Molyneux, who doesn't even... Well, okay, this is my hope, that he will engage with me. I don't actually even need him to talk to me. I really want to get to... Okay, I want to win the debate. I want to say that And actually, yeah, I'm going to say I actually have better leadership qualities. I will do what I think is required, and of course, in order to do that, I need your support. I need some kind of moral authority to say I speak on behalf of the marginalised, the neglected, the inarticulate, the neets, the marginalised. That's what you are. That's what we are. But even the marginalised can, with a bit of cooperation and organisation and leadership, get somewhere. There was some slave revolt, wasn't there, in Roman times? Spartacus. They were all caught and crucified, of course, but at least their name, his name, lives on anyway. But what is important for you to understand is that you cannot do without a moral system, and this is the kind of thing that Stefan, as a philosopher, is anxious to push on you. And of course, the problem being an atheist, and I knew that he would get to this bit when, he's absolutely certain he's right, but nobody will agree with him because he can't make them agree with him. So that his discussion with JF didn't really end well, and I can tell you the reason, because, the situation was that JF has already declared himself to be a nihilist. So that's the antithesis of being a absolutist. I know the word wasn't actually mentioned, unless it was, and I wasn't paying attention, but Stefan, having an ideology, an idea to promote, was an absolutist. Of course he would be, because he's saying universally preferable behaviour. That's my idea. It's true, isn't it? It's obvious, isn't it? How can you deny it? And JF simply said, yes, I do deny it. And it never got any further than that, and it was very frustrating for Stefan, and with whom I've actually spoken twice. I'd be happy to do it with him again, but I think before any debate is to take place, the framing of the proposition is crucial to having a productive and satisfying debate and conclusion. I know it was last July, wasn't it? I had a debate with Church of Entropy that I know will be impossible to interest anyone on, because it was really too theoretical. I agreed to it simply because I didn't feel I could decline the opportunity. So the debate was, is God personal or impersonal, which is, of course, actually a very silly subject. And I would call it the deist-theist debate. So basically Jen's position was that God was impersonal, and she took the deist position, and I am agnostic, said, well, there's no point in worshipping a God that doesn't intervene in human affairs and doesn't know our hearts and minds. Why do that? I mean, because if you said that God created the universe and is dead, then why pray? You might as well be a moral nihilist, and this is really the view of Church of Entropy, that the universe is impersonal, God is impersonal, and and she says she's a nihilist, and of course I can't say that, because I'm pushing on you the principles of secular Quranism, and I'm saying it will be better if you adopt my system. And how it works is this: if you believe in God, if you believe in the Abrahamic God, then you would be obliged to subscribe to the whole narrative, in that he gave the Jews their scripture, he made them his chosen people, and then subsequently he made another revelation to Gentiles in the form of the Quran through Muhammad. You don't have to believe it, you don't have to accept it, but just be aware that that is the narrative of the Abrahamic faiths. Well, Christ is included, but he's a kind of bridge, a kind of stepping stone, and you've got to the other side, and the idea is that you don't really need to believe in that anymore. And the whole point is really, it's all about writing, and Jen is helpful in that she's always insisting on her oral tradition, and her reasons are pretty clear to me. It's you can't really have the rule of law before the age of writing. So before that, people would only rely on their tribal leaders and hope that their leader can, will lead them well, will lead them out of danger, to the places they want to go, give them a good life, just rule fairly and that kind of thing. But the way of developing principles of justice would be through writing down the law so people could read the words that the law is comprised of. So we need to know whether it's a negative or positive law, in the sense that, it's a command that you must do something or you mustn't do something. We have to know what the law is in order to keep on the right side of it. So the fact that it was written is enormously helpful. So you see this in all kinds of history. We know that the Romans had their 12 tables of Rome, and it was because the plebs said, look, although you senators, you patricians say that we have the right to litigation, we don't have access to your books, so could you please carve out what the laws of Rome are in the forum? And this reluctantly they did, after scratching their heads and wondering what the words were. Unfortunately, they are only fragments survive, but it basically tells them about legal procedure, what rights certain people have over other people, and it's all useful to stay on the right side of law. So you can't have the rule of law without writing, and you can't have, and the thing about the rule of law is that you will always be, any court case is by nature adversarial, even in the inquisitorial system. It's basically one party saying you did this and the other party saying no, I didn't. And of course the due process is the investigation into the claims of each party, and then the judicial process of deciding who did or didn't do whatever, and whether they are guilty or not, or whether damages are payable, and that kind of thing. So writing is necessary, and that's why the Torah, the Ten Commandments, the Talmud, and the Quran are so important in advancing and developing this theme to the point that we are now living in an advanced society with many established legal procedures that we now take for granted, but which we can imagine were learned in the hard way, such as the one about, this is in Deuteronomy chapter 19 verse 15, to the effect that no man shall be convicted of any crime on the uncorroborated testimony of a possibly lying witness. So this is a very important right, otherwise anybody can be making up accusations against you and conspire amongst themselves to make up accusations against you and, say with all their girlfriends that you sexually harassed or, did those terrible things that Harvey Weinstein did. And another thing that people keep forgetting is that, a woman would be being raped if she didn't consent, but if she did consent, then it's okay. But then she can withdraw her consent after appearing to give her consent during the sex act. Is that right or wrong? Of course it's wrong. But anyway, these days, it seems that you're required to believe the accuser, the complainant, and it's almost always a woman, although, of course, it can, in theory, be a child or a man. So, there are a lot of useful things in Scripture that have been thrown out with the bathwater. So this is something you should bear in mind, and knowing the little I do about Judaism and Christian theology and the Quran, I really think so much of that makes so much more sense than the crap that philosophy graduates learn. Really, they confuse themselves, they waste time talking nonsense, and they push ideas that don't go anywhere. Libertarianism is never going to go anywhere because it's a cold idea. It's a leave me alone idea. And the other problem with libertarianism is that, yes, although lots of libertarians can write and do write their books, there is no generally agreed book of libertarianism, so they will always be disagreeing with each other. These libertarians who've written books about libertarianism, there is no official handbook. And what is Scripture but the divine official handbook? So, really, if you think about it carefully now, you would know that the Noahide laws are, just up and running already, and Stefan's idea is kind of has not even arrived at the race. Well, secular Quranism is really fully grown, fully clothed and fully armed, and I really would like it if somebody of greater intellect than the people I'm forced to associate with would just challenge my ideas. And I'm saying, of course I'm confident that I will win, and I hope that Stefan will get in touch. We've already spoken twice before to talk about this. And what I actually want to do is, okay, we can do it a whole bunch of ways. I really don't mind, because obviously he's very invested in his own idea, having taken the trouble of writing a book about it. And I'm quite invested in mine, but, I can reel off what I need to say off the top of my head, and I really think if anybody's going to write anything, it should be somebody else. I want somebody else to be discussing my ideas. I'm tired of writing about them and saying the same thing again and again. I know it's already been written hundreds and thousands of times since I've started doing it. So I would like somebody of some intellectual stature to challenge my idea, and I have a proposition. And this is what it is, that to restore the patriarchy, nothing short of secular Quranism would do the job. And I already anticipate the problems with, Stefan and others who say, oh, but we don't want to restore the patriarchy. And then I'll say, why not? And then they'll say, whatever they're going to say. But I think the battleground, the format shouldn't be YouTube. It should be on Ask FM, and I know I'm kind of going on a campaign to promote them, and that's because I know most of the people who use it are stupid and ask really stupid questions, but I find that over the years that forensic questioning is a really quick way to dismantle and deconstruct your opponent's arguments, and it will become clear quite early on that the other person hasn't really got a convincing answer, or they don't know how to deconstruct your arguments because they're so rock solid. And this is what I like about Ask FM. It's like, you have your account, you have your profile, and then they do sort of, separate threads, and you can have a thread of, well, I suppose any number of questions related to a particular subject. And so it could be that, Stefan would ask me a whole bunch of questions, challenging secular Quranism, and there would be a whole thread, and I would answer, and and actually anybody can answer too. They can join in the asking of questions. It doesn't have to be, only Stefan, and I can do the same to him, and then you can all decide if any of you can be bothered, and I know you can't. You just, fly from stream to stream, and, like little birds with your little birdie friends, going from stream to interact with each other rather than to listen to what I say. But I'll read the chat now. Cookies asks about the age of consent. I don't know the answer. You can look it up yourself. What is the heart of the matter that you don't think I'll ever get to, Mark Smith? Okay, nobody really is addressing what I'm trying to say. Alex Woodrow says, there is no point arguing with 90% of people in general, as they just get upset because they don't want their illusions destroyed. I know. I mean, I've been looking for somebody who's sort of, honest enough to say, if I lose the debate, I'll concede. I'm already on Facebook, Cookies. So I know you all are attached to your particular views, but I'm just hoping that Stefan will, want to show off his ideas so much that he'd be prepared to debate with me, either verbally on a stream or doing it on Ask FM, and, we can both ask each other questions, and those of you who are interested can read it, and then you can decide who you thought won and who has a better idea. And I think that would, raise the standard of questions on Ask FM, and, just get us somewhere further. I had a list of things I was going to talk about, so yeah, go through the list. I don't know if I've even said it. So really, I was going to say that Stefan was the absolutist and JF was the nihilist. And when Stefan thought that he could get JF to agree that such a thing as his universal, the preferable behaviour exists, of course, JF kind of realised where it was going, and to concede would mean that Stefan wins the debate. So of course he wasn't going to do that. One of the things that I would like to ask JF is if he considers himself to be a sociopath. Because a sociopath is somebody who says, I haven't got principles, and I don't care that I don't have principles. And a psychopath will, do harm with more pleasure, because you'll probably get a few sociopaths who don't really want to hurt anyone, but if they think it advantages them, they'll lie and cheat and steal and kill, reluctantly with a bit of guilt, but they'll still do it. So that's a question I would like to ask JF. Of course, he'd be very welcome to participate in that. All you have to do is set up an account. It is a way to let your fans, give you information, to tell you stuff. It is a little bit policed, I know, but it is still a useful way of interacting with other people. Oh, thank you, Alex. I'm really touched that you think society would be a better place with flair and power. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Alex. But really, what I need to do, what I really need to do is, get my ideas propagated, and also really I have to show that my ideas are best, and the only way to do it is to engage in debates. But I'm afraid there is a conspiracy to avoid engaging with me, maybe because I'm a victim of my own success. I haven't lost a debate yet, and nobody wants to lose a debate with me, particularly when they know they haven't got a better idea than mine, but hate mine. So I really would be grateful if you help me and tweet my ideas, tweet my posts, tweet my videos, and discuss my ideas with each other on a different social media. I mean, if you think there's anything in my ideas, I hope you will do that. I really am trying to solve the problem, and of course I think fundamentally it is a religious problem, a moral problem that many are in denial about. So I think I've said all I've wanted to say. I might have jumped around the subjects a bit. But anyway, I got to the bottom of the trouble between JF and Stefan, and And why I've adopted my particular way of dealing with things is that I knew before I started out that, even if I said, oh, look, I wrote the Quran, isn't it wonderful? I wrote it, and then people will just say, well, we don't like it. We don't want it. No thanks. So you will find that the most successful revolutionaries would be prophets, and they would have the sense to invoke a higher authority, and they would have the wisdom to be able to predict the future, to understand the psychology of the people they seek to persuade, and know what they're dealing with. The horrors of human nature, the mental illness, the pride, the sin, the envy, just the infuriating obstructiveness and psychopathy of most people. Of course, I can't get back on Twitter because they know my ISP. And I think other people should do it. I mean, really, you are kind of my eyes and my ears, and if you agree with my idea in any way, you should be talking about them in real life to other people, on social media anonymously if you must. But I can't do it on my own, can I? And I don't see that as such a hopeless cause, simply because I'm actually, virtually unknown with 4 people watching me now. But all the big shots, they're not really saying anything useful or consistently to make any difference. I know Richard Spencer talked about Islam twice, but he's shut up about it, hasn't he? Mark Smith, I actually know that Mark Collard actually told me that, I'm not getting on his channel. I'm not getting on the channels of any of his associates. They've kind of decided to shut me out. In exactly the same way that the liberal media have. So this is what I'm up against, and it's because people can't face the truth. Because really, the media ought to be reporting the news, the truth, human interest stories, analysing my opinion. They'd be hauling me into the studio, wanting to interrogate me, but they don't. I mean, if I'm so stupid and so mad and so wrong, but the thing is that tactically, they avoid me. As to people who are nationalists, they don't want to answer my question: what is religion for? And they know that by ignoring my question, they can pretend that they have the upper hand. And of course, by actually suppressing my idea, they are already admitting that they've lost. But they're not intelligent to know it, but what can you do? Eventually, the penny will drop. The fact is, they can't answer any of my questions, and they don't care. They have to say what they've been saying for 20 years or more, because it's part of their identity now, and their identity is very precious to them, right? Their identity of blaming the Jews, blaming the Muslims, blaming liberals, but never, ever themselves. Mark Smith asks, why the hell would you want to talk to that Pratt Collard? I actually did a stream with him. There's a video of me talking to him. I don't know if you know that. I suppose I have to talk to these people because just because of the nature of my audience. That's where I started off from, so I need to, acknowledge the people with YouTube channels that have more subscribers than me, alright? So, and of course defeat him in argument, and he knows I'm going to defeat him in argument. That's why he's not letting me on his channel. And I know how dull it is because it's like 4 people agreeing with each other for 2 hours. But then there seems to be a significant demand for that sort of thing. It's kind of self-reinforcing. It's like, I guess, people going to a weekly religious service, Friday prayers, church on Sunday. There's a certain ritual, the same old thing has to be said, the same old rituals performed. They don't want me, upsetting them with my questions and my ideas. So maybe you'll want to help a little bit more. Just try and maybe get other people interested. Obviously, the higher status, the better. And of course, that's my problem. I can't get anyone high status. The ones I've been in touch with are too frightened, too cowardly, and morally corrupt. So, again, it's a problem of religion and a problem of the kind of social rules you are run by, and that's why patriarchy is so important. Because a patriarchy has the shape of a pyramid and it's very stable, and a matriarchy is really an inverted pyramid spinning on its apex like a top and about to topple over. And that's why it's dangerous, because a matriarchy is a danger even to itself. But I think I've spoken long enough. Talking to people who really don't have any hope of doing anything themselves and would probably hate it if I succeeded. So I guess there's no help for it. I'm just here to go through the motions, and then we'll just have to watch the Titanic sink. So thank you all for coming by.